Welcome to Shaping the New York City Skyline, the podcast that explores the stories behind the buildings that shape our city. I'm your host, Brenda Slokowski, and I'm here with my co-host,
David Shamshovich.
Hey, David, how are you?
Hey, Brenda. I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm good. We have an amazing co-host with us today, Camila Almeida.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
You may have heard her voice previously, but she's getting more involved in the podcast, so she'll be a steady member of the team. She works with us at Seiden Schein. She's an attorney and in the inclusionary and transactional matters with us. And we're really excited that she's getting more involved.
And we also have Jason Hershkowitz with us. Jason is a partner in the tax incentives group at Seiden Schein, the forefront of everything that's happening with 421A and all other tax abatements, exemptions, including ICAP, 420C, and others. Here we are here today discussing the governor's workaround, which has a name, which I will get to.
It's a terrible name. It doesn't give you any description. That's the one criticism I have about the program.
The Gowanus Neighborhood Mixed Income Housing Development Program, or as I like to call it, GNMDP.
Takes you 2 minutes just to say the name of the program.
Right. This is the governor's attempt to create a 421A replacement that is now considered a workaround instead of having to pass things with the legislature, which was clearly ineffective during the last legislative session.
We actually recorded an episode last week after the governor's order was issued so that we can speculate about what the application is going to look like, what the deliverables are going to be, the deadlines.
Give everyone as much information as we had.
And of course, the next day, as we were going to publish, the RFP came out and gave a lot of those details. But no spoilers here. There are still lots of things that are unclear.
Yeah.
There are things that don't make sense necessarily. And there are things that need to be explained, which is why we brought our resident expert, Jason Hershkowitz. So I want him to take it away.
First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of the podcast. So
He really is. He really is.
And so I'm really happy to be here.
For those of you that can't see, he's wearing a Shaping the New York City Skyline t-shirt. Saying, I love that.
I was one of those standing outside with the
TRL signs.
So I haven't used the term oak tag in 20 years, but I was out there with the oak tag.
What are they calling it now? It's not oak tag. They call it
That's what I'm saying. It's not oak tag now.
So now poster board or something?
I don't know what it is.
When I was in like third grade, it was an oak tag.
Big cardboard things?
Yeah.
In any event, I'm happy to be here.
No, thank you for being here. And we want to sort of parse through this. We did this with you last week, but things have changed since that.
In some cases, we know more. In some cases, I feel like we know less.
Yeah.
Do you feel better about the workaround itself now that more information has come out?
I think we're going to start calling it an alternative.
Oh, not a workaround, an alternative.
It's funny because I think in ESD's board meeting, when they approved the program, I believe they were even calling it a workaround.
Is an alternative suggest that there's another alternative?
Right.
An alternative to an approved 421A.
Alternative to an extended 421A. That makes more sense.
Okay.
So I like alternative rock. So I think I'll like alternative 421A, but I'm going to have Jason really tell me exactly how this thing works. How do you apply? How do you submit?
Sure.
What are the deadlines?
Yeah.
Give us the deets.
Sure. So I think first I'll take a step back. And as I'm sure your listeners are aware, I almost said viewers. As I'm sure your listeners are aware, the 421A tax exemption program, which provided an exemption for residential construction that expired for projects that did not commence by June 15th of 2022. The governor and the state legislature have been in discussions and negotiations to try to come up with some sort of new program or extension of that program, which didn't happen. And so the governor took it upon herself, issued an executive order with something that would basically extend the time that projects under 421A had to complete construction. Under the old version of 421A, projects needed to complete construction by June 15th of 2026. There were many projects that might have commenced in time, but did not get financing or are not far enough in construction where the June 15th, 2026 completion deadline is in doubt. And the governor here is providing a way in which those properties might still enjoy benefits similar or exactly like 421A without necessarily completing by that statute's mandatory deadline. So what the governor did was issue an executive order for the Gowanus Neighborhood Mixed Income Housing Development Program.
Gowanus.
And the way this would work would be that the state would take title of the property for the duration of the 421A program. Essentially, during that time, they would lease that property back to the developer with a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, that would mirror what the 421A would have provided. So essentially, by the state taking ownership, all tax burden is gone. The state does not pay property taxes. And so with zero property taxes, the state would then charge the developer what the 421A taxes would have been, essentially giving the property owner a 421A benefit.
And after that benefit period, the developer would then get their property back.
Correct. At the end of this program, the lease goes away, the property goes back to ownership of the developer. That is correct.
So what are the requirements that you need to comply with in order to be eligible for this,
Right.
For the program?
So broadly speaking, the state wants properties to comply with what 421A would have been. There are a few more restrictions that the state has imposed. First of all, just like under 421A, properties would need to have commenced construction by June 15th of 2022. Generally speaking, getting a permit and putting in some sort of foundation element. What this program does, though, is actually up the minimum number of required units from 6 to 50. So they're looking for larger projects in this case. And probably a very big new requirement here is, as with most state projects, MWBE goals. 421A program originally had no sort of minority and women-owned business enterprise requirements. But with this program, they would have a goal of something like 30% MWBE participation.
Another change there is that these units, the affordable units, are actually going to be permanently affordable.
That's true. So the program indicates that these units will, instead of under 421A, which were typically affordable for either 35 or 40 years, this is requiring permanent affordability. I'm glad you mentioned that. It didn't even occur to me, mostly because all of these projects are also mandatory inclusionary housing projects. Under mandatory inclusionary housing, these affordable units would be permanently affordable anyway. So absent some sort of a few units here or there, which might not be participating in both programs, generally this is probably very little of a difference for the projects that were originally being built.
Are there options like the old 421A?
Yeah, so like I said, the program, at least it's indicating that it's going to mirror 421A, which provides you with 6 options. And according to this, any one of those options can be chosen. So I don't think from a 421A perspective, there is much difference from what they would have done previously to what this program is.
Isn't there a specific option that applies to the Gowanus?
As we said, Gowanus is mandatory inclusionary housing, which I believe it has been given mandatory inclusionary housing option 1.
Yes.
Which essentially requires 25% of your floor area to be affordable. That most closely aligns to 421A affordability option A. That is, in almost all cases, what I would think a developer would choose. Affordability option A requires 10% of the units to be affordable at 40% of AMI, another 10% at 60% of AMI, and then another 5% at up to 130% of AMI. So essentially, again, 25% of your units being affordable under affordability option A, which is why it kind of closely aligns to MIH option 1.
So it'll essentially align to that, given that we're in an MIH area that requires option 1.
I think that certainly is the intention, is for them to overlap. It's possible that for various reasons, a different affordability option is chosen, but I think you're most likely to see that option, yes.
Yeah. In terms of the submission, because it's MIH, do we know what the interplay is between MIH and 421A? Because in order to begin construction, you have to get approval under MIH and have a restrictive declaration in place.
Right. So I think that is one of the open questions, and I'm not sure if this RFP really addresses that clearly enough. Well, under the RFP, you need to apply by September 29th of 2023. That doesn't give you a whole lot of time to figure out what you want to do, get your application together, and apply. Like we said, these projects are all MIH projects as well, and in order to get MIH approval, it's a lengthy process at HPD. I think the projects that are most likely to take advantage of this program probably aren't far along, or maybe not have even started that MIH process at HPD. So I'm not really sure how they expect you to go through your ESD application process while not really having your MIH approval at the same time. In most cases, like David, you were saying, you go through MIH, you get approval, then you're allowed to get your full new building permit and you start your vertical construction. It kind of seems like we might be jumping the gun a little bit here in having to apply for this new program before you've really made your way through MIH. Similarly, one of the application requirements here is kind of having a construction lender on board already, which if projects are really not far along, then they may not have a construction lender yet, and they may be forced to get one very quickly in order to comply with this new program.
Speaking of 421A requirements, are there a lot of differences on the requirement from the expired program to what they're proposing here?
No, I don't think there are a lot of differences. I mentioned the increase in the minimum number of units to 50. The biggest change, which is the whole purpose of the program, is to extend the time you have to complete construction. The old program had a completion deadline of June 15th of 2026. This is going to theoretically give you more time to complete and therefore receive the pseudo 421A benefit. One, I think, thing that has to be clarified is the original program proposal from the governor indicated that they would give projects 48 months to complete from the closing with ESD when you deeded it to ESD and had the lease back. Whereas the RFP indicates 48 months from construction commencement. We don't know exactly what they mean by construction commencement. If they mean the 421A definition of construction commencement,
Everybody just lost a year.
yeah, this program doesn't help you because you had to commence by June 15th of 2022. 4 years gives you June 15th of 2026. So there's no extra time. So either they kind of misspoke here and they mean from the closing with ESD, or they mean some sort of recommencement of construction following your approval for the program.
Is there any interplay between this new workaround and the other tax exemptions that you frequently see with 421A?
What we used to do fairly often under the old 421A, use 421A as well as the industrial and commercial abatement program, also known as ICAP. In that case, we would subdivide the project into condominium tax lots where some would apply for 421A and others would apply for ICAP. I would expect that the same structure can be used here. It's a little unclear based on the closing and the deed and the lease back. When would you need a condo? Would you need a condo? What needs to be part of the deed? What needs to be part of the lease back? I think those are all questions that will probably flesh themselves out as more people apply for this program and the state kind of figures out how it has to accommodate the way in which developers build buildings in New York City.
You had mentioned earlier that essentially they would be a ground lease. The city would be deeded the property and there would be a ground lease back to the developer. Do you know what sort of form that ground lease would take?
While I haven't seen a sample for this particular program, this actually isn't all that new of a structure. It's been done fairly often before in similar sort of circumstances. One place where we saw it happen a lot and we were involved in many of these projects was in Battery Park City, where the state owns the property and leased property to developers to actually develop the buildings. And in that case, the only difference being those leases allowed the developer to apply for 421A with the city, get a 421A certificate of eligibility, and the state would recognize that and reduce the pilot payments under that lease. Here, similar circumstance, except that the developer here will not be expected to go to HPD and actually apply for 421A. They wouldn't be eligible because they won't meet the construction deadline. So in that case, it's probably a little bit easier of a process than what we saw in Battery Park City.
Is HPD even involved in this process at all?
That's a good question as well. The original request for proposal, there was a line in there that said that any pilot, that the state would go to the city for approval of any pilot. That wasn't in the actual RFP. So I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen or not. I'm curious to see how the state is going to kind of judge these projects on their 421A eligibility. Will anyone actually be looking at it? How closely will they be looking at it? Will they go to the city to look at anything? One of the requirements of the application is an opinion of council that the project is eligible, but I would be surprised if that's the level.
They require that regularly in any event, right?
Well, they require that for MIH applications, absolutely. But as part of a normal 421A application, there's no opinion council.
Okay, so they require that specifically here.
Yeah.
Because we're used to seeing it in the MIH context.
Right.
So it's all sort of the same.
So is that the level of review, that ESD is going to have with respect to 421A?
Oh God, I hope not.
There are also certain affidavits that an architect's going to have to provide. In those affidavits, they're going to affirm that the project meets certain 421A requirements. But I would expect that someone is going to be looking at these, making sure that it mirrors 421A.
Yeah, maybe somebody who has familiarity with 421A, if you want to volunteer, Jason, to start reviewing those applications, got a side hustle.
No, I definitely have time for a second job.
Don't we all?
The other thing that was interesting in the RFP is that it talks about you can qualify, but you can't have any sort of other residential tax exemption abatement or credit except for credits under the brownfield cleanup program. That language is a little iffy. I just wanted to touch upon that.
Well, we were talking about the different affordability options under 421A originally. Some of those options preclude government assistance. 421A in general, actually most tax programs in general, prohibit concurrent benefits, meaning you can't get two at the same time, which is why we use that condominium tax lot structure in order to apply for 421A and ICAP at the same time. Again, I don't know how the process is going to work with the deed and the lease back in this particular instance. So again, the hope is that if needed, we'll be able to create a condominium and get either, the pseudo 421A and ICAP if we need it. And we wouldn't have to really worry about any of those other tax abatement exemptions or any other credits.
This is maybe something you touched upon earlier, but it touches upon what you just said, which is under the old 421A now, that old program allowed a certain percentage, is it 12%, right, of the commercial space to be covered under the 421A tax abatement. I don't think I saw anything here that specifically references that.
So the old 421A, I guess the Affordable New York Housing Program, like all 421A programs before that, allowed up to 12% of the project's aggregate floor area to be commercial, community facility, or accessory use space. This RFP does not mention that 12% limit, but again, relying on their words that this is going to mirror 421A and that you're going to comply with the 421A requirements, for now, I'm assuming that they're going to allow that 12% as well.
Yeah, if they're going to mirror it as closely as possible that prior program, then that's sort of probably correct.
Going back to what I was saying before, in those old 421A applications, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development would review your aggregate floor area to make sure that the project was within 12%. How are they going to do that here? Are they going to do it at all? Or are they just going to rely on an architect or an opinion of council that it meets that requirement?
Well, I guess that would lead me to my next question. As part of the submission requirements for gaining approval from ESD and the Public Authorities Control Board, there's going to be architectural deliverables, but it also seems like there's going to be construction letter requirement and a contractor letter requirement.
Right. So these are all obviously requirements that were not a part of the original 421A application process. Again, I think this is one of the questions that remain outstanding, is how all this will work in the timing of the actual development of an actual project. And like I was saying before, I think a lot of these projects that would hope to take advantage of this new program may not be far enough along to even have a lender or a construction manager at this point. So I think it's going to rush projects a little bit into getting their act together and starting the development in order to meet the timing requirements of this new program. But you did bring up a very good point that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's the Public Authorities Control Board. Under this program, in addition to ESD approving the program as a whole, individual projects need to go to the Public Authorities Control Board for approval. The Public Authorities Control Board is part of the New York State Budget Office, and essentially they need to give approval to any financial transaction that the state gets into. So they need to approve any project-related financing that the state provides. So I guess in some ways this is being considered, project financing from the state government. The Public Authorities Control Board consists of 5 members. 3 of those members are voting members. There's an appointee of the governor, and then there's basically appointees from the Senate majority and the Assembly majority. And so obviously the Assembly and the Senate would not approve the governor's original 421A proposal, and were hesitant to approve any other replacement or extension of the 421A. So what does that mean here? Well, the Public Authorities Control Board, really they're only supposed to be looking at the financial parameters of a project. Is this financially feasible? Basically, will it get the state into any kind of budget issue or financial problem by approving the project? I think it'd be a tough thing to say that any of these individual 421A projects or pseudo 421A projects are going to create a budget problem for the state. That being said, each project is going to need to get approval from this control board. And I suppose there's always a possibility that the control board would reject one or more of these projects.
And the vote needs to be unanimous, you said?
The vote needs to be unanimous, and a resolution would be issued, yes.
Is this the only approval that a project will need to get throughout the whole process?
It's going to have to, I believe, also go to the director of ESD for approval, but I would expect the the director would just kind of rubber stamp the project. They've approved the program as a whole. I think ESD is certainly in favor of it. So I wouldn't expect any issues with that approval. I think it's be interesting to see what happens with the Public Authorities Control Board, though.
I don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully, the governor, her people thought about that beforehand when doing this, thinking that there's a way that they issue a resolution. It's going to have to reflect a financial reasoning for rejecting.
If the control board sticks to that, which is what they're supposed to be reviewing, I think it'd probably be pretty difficult to reject any of these.
But we don't know what they can do. And she's got around them, so now it's sort of like a little bit of a chess match.
I'll also say, never underestimate people.
That's true.
That's applicable to everything.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Let's see. So what are the fees that are associated with it? Some that parallel 421, others that are above and beyond it?
Yeah. So like 421A, there's a fee of $3,000 per dwelling unit. They're asking for that fee in this application as well. There will be additional administrative fees that would not have been associated with 421A. There's going to be a closing here. So developers have to pay the fees for that closing.
Recording fees.
Recording fees. ESD is going to want the developer to pay ESD's fees as well, their legal fees. So there definitely are additional administrative fees in addition to what would have normally been the 421A fee.
But one difference is that the old program, the fee would be paid after we get the first TCO, right? Once we get the application, and now we would have to get the fee up front.
That's true. The timing of the 421A fee will be different. Under the way the 421A program worked previously, you didn't apply for the benefit until after the project completed construction. At that time, the $3,000 fee per unit would be due. Here, it seems like they're asking for the fee to be paid upfront along with the closing. So it definitely would be an accelerated timeline for that fee.
Are there any other things that you think are worth mentioning in terms of either how this program will work to the benefit of those who can qualify in Gowanus? I mean, obviously, it's not as great as a full 421 replacement. I think everybody could agree to that, but it's something, and that's the first part of it. But the second is, how do you think, if anything, this is going to expand to other parts of the city?
I definitely think this is a good effort. I think we'll see how many projects actually take advantage of the program. Remember, there's, I would say, basically 3 universes of project in Gowanus right now. You have projects that commence construction under 421A, are well on their way, and are confident that they're going to complete construction by June 15th of 2026. They have no need for this program. Then you have projects that really haven't gotten started. Maybe they did the minimal amount of work needed to vest under 421A. They don't have financing. They don't really have their act together yet, but maybe this program gives them a reason to get their act together, to start construction, go into this program, get 421A, build a building, build housing, build affordable housing, which is what we want. There's a third type of project that they commence construction under 421A. They think they're going to complete construction by June 15th of 2026. Between now and then, anything could happen, and they're not actually going to complete. To me, the deadline for these applications by the end of September may be a little early. I mean, personally, I'd like to see some more time to see how some of these projects start to develop and whether they might need a program like this. But this kind of seems to preclude those. So I'm interested to see how this test case works for these projects. Maybe they end up extending the application deadline in Gowanus, and maybe they extend this program to other areas of the city. I think there are definitely other areas of the city. You have projects in the same set of circumstances. They commence construction thinking they were going to get 421A. They may or may not complete by June 15th to 26. A lot of those are also mandatory inclusionary or voluntary inclusionary housing projects. And I think it'd be worthwhile for the city to extend the program and get all those affordable housing units online as well.
I agree.
Yeah. Hopefully that'll happen, but we just don't know when. And I think it's gonna depend a lot on how many people apply for this.
Yep.
And what the Public Authorities Board does to approve it. And I think if they push back, the governor may hesitate to bring it elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I think it's still going to take a long time to go anywhere else because they want to see how this thing runs and how it gets approved.
Yeah. I think Gowanus is probably a very good area to start out in. It was a big area rezoning. There are lots of projects in there that could potentially be ripe for this program. Generally, people are in favor of the rezoning there, knowing it was going to provide a lot of affordable housing. So from an area perspective, I think this is a good place to start. And if it's a successful program and it works how everybody wants it to, then if the legislature and the governor can't agree on a new 421A program, maybe this alternative
Workaround.
this workaround can be applied in other areas as well.
I got it. Working with the 421A workaround. Boom. Episode title.
I'm pretty sure we already came up with that.
But I had to tell everybody that.
All
we
right,
found it.
I mean, yes, you just thought of that just now. That was
Take number 1. We came up
just
with that.
Exactly. Well, Jason, we really appreciate you coming in.
Like I said, it was really my pleasure. I am a huge fan. I think the episodes have been great so far. And so anytime you need me, I'm happy to come back. I was actually thinking as well, as a fan of the podcast, have you guys given any thought to what your fans should call themselves?
Oh, like Swifties or Believers.
or Shamshovanite.
No.
No, that wouldn't work.
Too long, Shamshovanite.
Also, I'm here too. We can't just name the fans here.
That is.
Could you only use one name? I'm sorry.
Mine is the easier to spell.
That's fair.
So I was actually thinking that we should call ourselves Skyliners.
I love
like
it.
it. Oh my God. Skyliners out there, leave a comment if you love it.
Hashtag Skyliners. I think we're going to go for it. Is there any credit we have to give to you for that name?
I would love to take credit, but actually my wife came up with that name.
The brains of
But if you like it, if you do like it, I'm happy to take the credit and I won't let her know.
Well, if you listen to this, thank you, Diane.
Also, every time I say the word wife, I say, my wife.
I know.
Jason, first of all, thank you for naming. This is
Thank
fantastic.
you for naming us.
Yeah, we're going to have to make them shirts now.
I'm not naming you, I'm naming me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Naming our followers.
You're sort of a pseudo fan. You're like an only fan.
No.
And to you Skyliners out there, if you want to call in with a question for Jason, please, Jason, give us your info so people can contact you about this program and other tax abatements, exemptions, things like
Yeah,
that.
sure. So first of all, I would encourage everybody to visit our website, seidenschein.com, our LinkedIn page. You can reach us at info@seidenschein.com, or specifically the tax incentive department here, of which I'm a part, is taxincentives@seidenschein.com, all one word, plural. And that's probably the easiest and fastest way to get in.
And we'll include that in our notes as well. So if you have a problem spelling Seiden Schein, why would you?
Why would you?
Just look at it.
I would give you my personal email address, but no one needs another long last name.
You can find them on our website.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look,
guys.
we
Thank
had
you, guys.
a lot of fun having you on. Thanks a lot.
Anytime.
Well, everyone, that's our show. Thanks so much for listening.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave comments, because we love to hear from our audience, right, Brenda?
Yeah, feel free to reach out at info@seidenschein.com or visit our website at seidenschein.com. We really look forward to hearing from you.
You could also reach out to David and Brenda at dshamshovich@seidenschein.com and bslakowski at seidenschein.com.
Those are lengthy last names. You can just find us on our website.
That's right.